your mind, every word a step forward. Let the learning begin. Let the learning begin. Boost your English. Boost your English. B-Y-E. B-Y-E. Welcome to the workshop.
BYE Workshop, Episode 5. Welcome to the 5th session of the BYE Workshop. I am Ryan. If you are looking for comfort or entertainment, you are in the wrong place. This is not a conversation. It is a clinical extraction of linguistic data. We are here to dismantle the English language and replace ambiguity with surgical precision. In this workshop, we do not suggest. We instruct. Your progress depends entirely on your ability to process these facts with absolute focus. Listen closely. There will be no repetitions. Let us begin. The vocabulary for this session has been curated to enhance your linguistic precision. To bid. This verb operates on two distinct frequencies. First, to offer a specific price for something, typically at an auction. For example, he decided to bid $1,000 for the vintage microphone. Second, as a formal greeting or command. For example, I bid you farewell until our next session. Rather. An adverb used to indicate a degree or a preference. For example, the software update was rather disappointing. Rather than. A phrase used to give importance to one thing over another, meaning instead of. For example, you must focus on accuracy rather than speed. Pitch dark or pitch black. An environment completely devoid of light. Total visual opacity. For example, the server room was pitch black after the power grid failed. Sensible. Having or using good judgment, reasonable and practical. For example, saving a backup of your data is a sensible decision. Sensitive. Quick to detect or respond to slight changes, signals, or influences, also, easily offended emotionally. For example, the new microphone is highly sensitive to background noise. To step up. To take action when there is a need or opportunity for it, to increase performance. For example, the junior engineer had to step up when the project manager resigned. Snake oil. A substance or product with no real value, sold with false claims of being a cure or a solution. For example, that optimization software is pure snake oil, it does nothing to improve CPU performance. To throw the switch. To operate a mechanism, often a lever, to complete or break an electrical circuit, initiating a major action. For example, the technician is ready to throw the switch and activate the mainframe. To throw the node. A contextual anomaly. Node refers to a high-end, red-colored brand of professional stage keyboards. In a specific studio context, asking "Can I throw the node?" was a musician's joke about smashing expensive equipment like a rock star. It illustrates that linguistic data is useless without physical context. Weird. Suggesting something supernatural, uncanny, or deeply unnatural. For example, a weird static noise interrupted the recording. Strange. Unusual or surprising in a way that is hard to understand. For example, it is strange that the file deleted itself. Bizarre. Very unusual or strange, often involving incongruous or striking elements. For example, the AI generated a bizarre sequence of random images. Ugly. Unpleasant or repulsive in appearance. For example, the old user interface was incredibly ugly. Awful. Extremely bad or unpleasant. For example, the audio compression on that track is awful. Horrible. Causing or likely to cause horror or shock. For example, a horrible system crash wiped out the database. Terrible. Extremely or distressingly bad or serious. For example, making a logical error here will have terrible consequences. Gorgeous. Beautiful or magnificent to a breathtaking degree. For example, the graphic rendering of the simulation is gorgeous. Nice. Pleasant, agreeable, or satisfactory. For example, it is a nice feature, but not essential. Lovely. Very beautiful or attractive, often inspiring affection. For example, the analog synthesizer has a lovely, warm tone. Wonderful. Inspiring delight, pleasure, or admiration. For example, the speed of the new processor is wonderful. Marvelous. Causing great wonder, extraordinary. For example, the engineering behind this neural network is marvelous. Beautiful. Pleasing the senses or mind aesthetically. For example, the code was written in a clean, beautiful structure. Good. To be desired or approved of. For example, this is a good starting point for your analysis. Right. Morally good, justified, or factually correct. For example, you have the right answer. Straight. Moving in one direction without a curve, or being honest and direct. For example, give me a straight answer without hedging. Perfect. Having all the required or desirable elements, qualities, or characteristics. For example, the synchronization between audio and video is perfect. True. In accordance with fact or reality. For example, it is true that linguistic immersion accelerates learning. Bad. Of poor quality or a low standard. For example, using outdated drivers is a bad practice. Wrong. Not correct or true. For example, you plugged the cable into the wrong port. False. Not according with truth or fact, fabricated. For example, the system generated a false error report. Bent out of shape. An idiom meaning to take offense, become angry, or get upset over a specific situation. For example, do not get bent out of shape just because I corrected your grammar. Denied. To state that something is untrue, or to refuse to grant a request. For example, access to the central server was denied. Forbidden. Not allowed, typically strictly banned by an authority or rule. For example, eating in the recording studio is forbidden. Not allowed. A general statement that permission is absent. For example, unauthorized users are not allowed on this network. Unauthorized. Not having official permission or approval. For example, an unauthorized login attempt was detected. To agree. To have the same opinion about something. For example, experts agree that data security is paramount. To speak. To say words in order to convey information or express a feeling. For example, he speaks with absolute authority. To talk. To engage in conversation or express ideas, often implying a two-way exchange. For example, we need to talk about the system architecture. To say. To utter words to convey a specific message or piece of information. For example, what exactly did the error log say? To claim. To state or assert that something is the case, typically without providing evidence or proof. For example, the developer claims the software is free of bugs. Smile. A facial expression indicating pleasure, amusement, or friendliness. For example, a smile does not always indicate agreement. Laughter. The physical manifestation of amusement. For example, nervous laughter filled the room when the system crashed. To cry. To shed tears as a physical response to pain, distress, or overwhelming emotion. For example, a machine cannot cry, but it can fail. To apologize. To express regret for something that one has done wrong. For example, you must apologize for disrupting the network protocol. To carry on. To continue an activity or task. For example, ignore the warning light and carry on with the extraction. To keep up. To move or progress at the same rate as someone or something else. For example, the hardware cannot keep up with the software demands. To go ahead. To proceed or to give permission to start. For example, we have clearance, so go ahead and initiate the sequence. To step back. To withdraw from a situation physically or mentally to gain perspective. For example, we must step back and analyze the root cause of the failure. Artificial. Made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally. For example, artificial intelligence is reshaping our workflow. Simulation. The imitation of the operation of a real-world process or system over time. For example, the flight simulation is ready for testing. Emulation. The reproduction of the function or action of a different computer or software system. For example, we are running an emulation of a retro console. Cybernetic. Relating to the science of communications and automatic control systems in both machines and living things. For example, the cybernetic implant interfaces directly with the nervous system. Electronic. Operating by means of components that control the flow of electrons. For example, the electronic circuitry was damaged by the surge. Opportunity. A set of circumstances that makes it possible to do something, a chance for advancement or progress. For example, the expansion of the company provided a great opportunity for the employees to learn new skills. In a high-stakes professional environment, recognizing an opportunity is the difference between stagnation and mastery.
Attention. Les francophones font une erreur conceptuelle grave avec ce mot. En français, opportunité est souvent utilisé comme un adjectif substantivé pour désigner le caractère de ce qui est opportun, de ce qui tombe au bon moment. En anglais, opportunity est un nom comptable qui désigne une chance, une occasion concrète de faire quelque chose. Vous devez dire
I had many opportunities.
là où le français dirait j'ai eu de nombreuses occasions. Ne traduisez pas votre logique française en anglais.
Instinctively. Without conscious thought, by natural instinct. For example, he instinctively hit the backup switch. Playfully. In a light-hearted, cheerful, and non-serious manner. For example, the prompt was written playfully, but the AI interpreted it literally. Highly. To a high degree or level. For example, this configuration is highly unstable. Logically. According to the rules of formal argument and sound reasoning. For example, you must approach this problem logically. Luckily. By good fortune. For example, luckily, the primary data was not corrupted. Precisely. In exact terms, without vagueness. For example, tell me precisely what happened. To notice. To become aware of something. For example, did you notice the drop in frame rate? To rent. To pay for the temporary use of something, such as equipment or property. For example, we rent cloud storage by the terabyte. To hire. To employ someone for a job, or to temporarily use a service or object for payment. For example, we must hire a cybersecurity expert. To borrow. To take and use something with the promise of returning it. For example, I need to borrow your flash drive. To get. To come into possession of, to receive or earn. For example, how did you get the administrator password? To obtain. A more formal way to say get or acquire. For example, you must obtain clearance before proceeding. To retrieve. To find or extract information stored in a computer or database. For example, the system failed to retrieve the archived file. To give. To freely transfer the possession of something to someone. For example, give me the raw audio track. To sell. To hand over something in exchange for money. For example, they sell user data to third parties. To run out of something. To exhaust a supply or quantity. For example, the battery is about to run out of power. To run for cover. To quickly seek shelter from danger or an attack. For example, when the firewall dropped, they had to run for cover. To run a program. To execute a set of software instructions. For example, run the diagnostic program immediately. To look into. To investigate or examine the facts of a situation. For example, we need to look into the cause of the latency. To look like. To have an appearance similar to someone or something else. For example, this code looks like a modified Trojan. To look after. To take care of or be responsible for someone or something. For example, looking after the servers is a full-time job. To look out. To be vigilant and take notice, to watch for danger. For example, look out for phishing emails. To look down. To cast one's eyes downward, or to regard someone with a feeling of superiority. For example, do not look down on beginners. To look up. To direct one's gaze upward, to search for information, or to improve. For example, look up the definition of that function in the manual. To turn on or to switch on. To start the operation or flow of something by means of a valve, switch, or button. For example, turn on the microphone. To turn off or to switch off. To stop the operation. For example, switch off the monitor when you leave. To burn. To destroy by fire, or in technology, to write data onto a CD or ROM chip. For example, burn the image file to the disk. To build. To construct something by assembling parts, or to compile software from source code. For example, it takes 10 minutes to build the final executable. To assume. To suppose to be the case, without proof. For example, never assume the user knows the keyboard shortcuts. To propose. To put forward an idea or plan for consideration. For example, I propose we rewrite the script. To suspect. To have an idea or impression of the existence, presence, or truth of something without certain proof. For example, I suspect a hardware malfunction. To make a statement. To express an idea or opinion explicitly and formally. For example, the company made a statement denying the data breach. Congratulations to those who have processed this session in its entirety. Your discipline is mandatory for progress. Before ending this session, a critical update. If you find this workshop too comfortable, you are invited to access the new BYE series, Matrix. The Matrix series is engineered exclusively for advanced learners. It focuses heavily on technology, science, and a significantly elevated level of English. Beginners are strictly advised to abstain. It will overload your system. As of April 2026, the BYE podcast has over 30 episodes available online. Each one is a repository of vocabulary, grammar, and detailed explanations. Use these resources wisely. Keep boosting your English. Bye for now.